Hi, Allison and Mary. I noticed that in your latest Cecile episode that you definitely avoided saying some of the French words because French is notoriously very bad and hard to pronounce. For future reference, Cecile, she calls her grandfather grand-père, and her parrot is cochon. And honestly, so our other main character in this series, if you're saying her name with a French accent, would be Marie Grace, which sucks to say. So usually when I talk about her in my American accent, I just call her Marie Grace or Marie Grace. I actually have an aunt, and her name is spelled like Marie, but we call her Mari. So I kind of use that same rule. Anyway, I love the podcast. Keep it up. I love American Girl. And thank you. Bye.
I just want to respond to this anonymous listener and just say, excusez-moi.
Je suis. So, as they say in French, podcast. Bonjour, fille américaine. We're trying.
We're trying. It's a mess.
We're trying.
It's really messy. Before we get into it, in case you couldn't, understand us because of our French accents, in the previous part of this segment, my name is Maddie. No, wait a second.
Je m'appelle?
No, I really did listen to how she said how to say Marie Grace. Oh, God. All right, never mind. Welcome to American Girls, the podcast. This is the podcast where we're reliving the American Girls series, book by book. I'm Maddie. Wait.
Je suis. No.
I don't think that was right. Wait, go ahead.
Je suis Alison. So part of the fierce feedback that we received is that it's not so much Marie Grace as Marie Grace.
And listen, I do think she was trying to do us a solid because here's the facts. Like, you actually do look up pronunciations of other words not in English. I 1000% do not. Like, I've just committed to that lifestyle. Maybe it's my own form of rebellion. I don't know what's going on with me, but I received those comments. Like, did I have any sense that those words were pronounced that way? Absolutely not. I'm calling in, I'm checking in on this episode as a person who's had an ungodly amount of Spanish education, who cannot speak much Spanish. And I'm having like flashbacks right now to you and I taking our Spanish exam in grad school. And we had to translate what I believe was a 19th century agricultural text. So, just like stuff we would find in life, right? Yes. And remember, he picked the text that purposefully had a word that no longer exists. And he was like, oh, yeah, I just like throw that in to see what people do with it.
And I will say this, you know what? Do I put on every single resume that I have translation proficiency and Espanol? Sí.
Wow.
And I don't mean if, I mean yes. Because depending on where you put
those TikTokers who are like, you know what? You can write any content you want. Like, go to copy.ai and like a robot will do it for you. Like, that's how you've been empowered by technology. And I respect that at this stage of the game. I'm
a linguist in the way that Emily in Paris is a linguist.
That can't bring myself to watch that show. No.
I love Emily in Paris. It's a beautiful delight.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know you'd seen it.
I, incidentally consume some media in preparation to talk about Marie Grace and the Orphans. I was going to say the whole title in French, but I don't want to show off at this point.
Wow, okay. You don't want to flex on me in front of all the listeners. And thank you for that. I didn't know that we were engaging Emily in Paris for this. Like, I'm behind, I guess. So I will have to dip into that. I mean, wow, I have not been watching that. Should I be?
So Emily in Paris is not great, but it is good, and it will pass the time. Okay. Much like the 2 Eggos I ate 2 minutes before you logged onto Zoom. Wow. Were they fantastic? No. Was it my way to celebrate Mardi Gras, which is the day on which we are recording? Yes.
It's Fat Tuesday, and never forget, like, I ate some candy before we recorded, so, I'm not living my best life, I guess. The Eggos sound good to me. I would accept some Eggos right now. But every year on Fat Tuesday, I always think about my grandmother. Every year she would tell this story. It's not related to Mardi Gras. It's not related to Lent. Nothing related. She once brought me to get my bangs trimmed. I was 8 years old. The woman cutting my bangs was like, oh my God, you're so beautiful and fat. She meant this as a compliment, meaning I seemed healthy. I had like an internal spiral that didn't really get, visual until after we left. And I was like, oh my God, she called me fat, whatever. And my grandmother was like, she's dead to me. Like without even understanding the facts or the contents, was like, she's dead to me. And then one of my brothers was like, maybe she meant PHAT. And then I think
she did.
I had to watch my brother explain what that acronym means to my grandmother, who was like, that's disgusting. She's a child. But anyway, like every year my grandmother was like, it's Fat Tuesday again, like PHAT Tuesday.
I think fat is beautiful. I think these are all wonderful things. I think you would receive that comment very differently in 2022.
Well, honestly, yeah. And, this is just like a podcast I'm really enjoying is Maintenance Phase, which is a really great evaluation of, body.
I thought you were going to say our podcast.
No, I mean, of course. Isn't it weird to recommend our podcast? Like, is that weird?
The way you said this is a podcast I'm really enjoying, I was like, yeah, I mean, these 5 minutes have been good for me too. I didn't know where. I think we're both a little hopped up on Mardi Gras.
I've had a lot of
celebrant
sugar. Yeah, I mean,
content.
I'm drinking a polar seltzer. Like, I'm living my best life over here. I'm kind of on one because of this book, but
yeah,
I mean, I was just to finish my thought. Like, Maintenance Phase, if anyone has not listened to it, has a really great exploration of like body politics and fat culture, and like fat as a non-judgmental descriptor, and I've really learned a lot from it, but it's also like super funny. So yeah, I mean, I would hope my younger self, had I had access to things like this podcast, would have reacted differently. But my grandmother was just like blind loyalty, so I could have told her anything and she'd be like, yep, she's dead, it's over, goodbye.
I think she did mean PH.
I mean, I have to tell myself, like, what if I just want to be fat Mary, like PHAT.
Yes.
I choose that in 2022. Oh my God. Needless to say, I've been listening to the voicemails, forgot that was happening, and I've really enjoyed listening to all of your messages. So thank you so much, everyone who's called us. And dear Anonymous, like, you made my day. I laughed. And, I feel shaken. I'm recalling how little effort I put into my foreign language training, and maybe I need to re-download Duolingo. Like, I don't know, man. Maybe I got to watch Emily in Paris, just take that way out of this. I don't know. What's the future?
I think part of her message is that she does not speak French, and so Emily is not exactly a great role model, but I don't really see Marie Grace learning a ton of French either. Do you? Let's be honest. I don't really see that happening. She had a different
education plan than we have available to us, which is, she played with orphans and they taught her French. Or they magically recovered her French within her. So it's like she didn't find her inner child. She found her inner French speaker.
Yeah.
Again, I respect that. We don't have that. I don't think we can do that part. So
Muzzy taught me
wow.
Je suis la jeune vie.
Bonjour, je suis le grand musique.
Je suis la jeune fille.
Yes, that's French they're speaking. And no, these children aren't French. They're American.
And then Moulin Rouge, the film, taught me a phrase that we won't repeat on this show.
I gotta say, I've been to the Moulin Rouge.
I have too.
I was like really disappointed by it.
Yeah,
I was like, this is super cheesy. I was like, this is like The Love Boat, but I love The Love Boat. And I was like, this is bleak. I wish I didn't know.
Can we pivot very briefly? So there is a really cool character in this book, and I think that we've just sort of decided 11 years after the fact that this character is named after our newest, youngest friend of the show.
Yes. Oh my God.
In a shocking twist of events.
Shocking twist of fate. So imagine my absolute surprise and delight for someone that we both knew from college, had their first baby this week, Beatrice, AKB, and I heard from her dad that he was listening with her when she was days old to our last episode. So she might be on record as our newest, youngest listener of all time. But then to read this book, and I was like, Sister Beatrice, like...
Yeah. Sister, indeed. Yes. So we're very grateful that the stars aligned and we got to say officially happy birthday, Beatrice. And very exciting times. Very happy for them.
Congrats. Welcome to the world. Welcome to the OGAG family. And, we hope you learn French at a young age so you don't turn into us, or Spanish or whatever language you want. No judgment. And then you can teach me, because I'll still be in the dark at that stage.
I don't see the Duolingo sponsorship coming in anytime soon.
We just don't send them this episode as as a sample. Okay.
I'm ready. You know what? And I have to say this. I just think I have to say what comes natural.
Uh-oh.
I think Marie Grace versus, let's be honest, she is a gal from Massachusetts, which means she is just as equally Marie Grace, if I may.
Mm-hmm. That's
I
right.
feel like being of the land where she resided in her formative years,
Right.
I'm allowed to call her Marie Grace.
I'm just like, I'm at a point where I'm going to keep trying the pronunciations at will. Maybe I retreat to an MG when I feel unsafe, and then I'll come back. So I don't really want to make any claims about what I will be doing going forward, but I am here. I'm into this. I'm scared. And, I'm ready. Let's do it.
So conventionally, our third book would be our surprise. And what a surprise indeed that we get from Marie Grace and the Orphans, which came out in 2011. But as we reiterated, is actually dedicated to a Beatrice born in 2022. Mm-hmm. Marie Grace can't believe what she finds, you won't either, on her doorstep one rainy night, a sweet little baby. More than anything, Marie Grace hopes her father will let the child stay with them. Then a stranger comes looking for the little boy, and Marie Grace realizes the baby is in terrible danger. Together, she and her friend Cecile come up with a plan to protect the child and to help the other orphans too. But when rumors of a terrible sickness begin to swirl in New Orleans, Marie Grace begins to worry. Will anyone truly be safe? No.
No, guess what?
I'll answer that for you right now.
Newsflash. You know who's really not safe after reading this book?
Us.
As I told you off air, I met the end of this book with a silent scream into my pillow last night.
Yeah.
It was, it was rough. This is rough stuff.
Two things occurred to me completely by accident. Two novels that I have read in the past week prepared me for this book, if I may.
Please tell me more.
I am an inexplicably high-level devotee of the Reese Witherspoon book club. Can't explain, won't explain, carrying on. So her team highly recommended the book Lucky, so I picked it up immediately. I can say I'm like a mild milquetoast recommend. That novel opens with a scene much like this one, which is a baby is found by a nun on a doorstep. Part 1. Part 2, Lucy Foley, my favorite thriller author, came out with a book called The Paris Apartment on 2/22/2022. Had to have it immediately, got it within 24 hours at a bookstore. It's about shenanigans at a Paris apartment.
Sounds great. I just wrote down the title. Yeah. So where are you at with this? Like, what did this do for you?
This book or those books?
I guess those books. Like, how did it prepare the way? And also, where are you at with the home edit? Because Reese just bought that. So is that now going to be part of your oeuvre? Or
no? It's just the books. I own one Draper James piece of clothing because it came in my triple F box that will not be named because they're not a sponsor yet. Okay. And I love it. I love it. Does it look good on me? No.
Actually, I thought about you because I went to Kohl's the other day. It was like the first time I've been to a store in months, and I know how much you don't love Kohl's. And correct. I didn't know that they are a Draper James affiliate, so there's a Draper James section in Kohl's. Again, that's new. I have not been to Kohl's in like years. I was like walking around like I was freaked out by the lights. I was like, oh my God, what is this place? Like, this is crazy. Nuts.
Were you as freaked out as Marie Grace finding the baby?
Allison?
I'm going to say no because she immediately thinks this is a great thing for her as a 10-year-old.
This is a book that's about saving a baby when the real child that needs saving is MG, aka Marie Grace, aka Marie Grace.
Yeah.
She's not well, Allison. And guess what? Neither are we for reading this book.
She's not well, and if you listened to our previous episode and you heard me avoiding the parrot's proper name, because I am actually not, in fact, able to parrot certain French words, you know that book ended with Cecile getting past a note from MG. MG has something to tell her, and we knew because we knew what the plot of this book was. We pick up here and we learn that it is May of 1853, and it is thrusting us right on this moment where Marie Grace is finding this baby. Marie Grace immediately has some kind of like in-depth knowledge of colorism and how that will affect the future of this child. And she is able to formulate a plot together with her other 10-year-old friend to try to protect this child. Something I find very interesting about this book is the way that it narrows in on sort of orphanhood as the central issue, because that's where the rest of the book goes. And I think I'm getting major Josefina vibes in that, like, these books star her but are not about her. Like, I think New Orleans was the star of book 1, and Orphans as a class of people are the stars of book 3.
I think that's a really great assessment, because there is something about reading her books that's different than the Cecile books and every other series but Josefina. You're absolutely right. Where you read it and you're like, why do I feel like low-key sorry for her in a way that I don't for other American girls? Like, even like Samantha, who is also an orphan. I mean, I guess Marie Grace is a half orphan, to use a phrase introduced to us in Peek into the Past. Which we can get into later, but it's because she doesn't get to be the center of her own story. I think that automatically displacement of her to the margins of books that are nominally about her makes her seem like she's disempowered in her own life, because she's not even at the center of her own narrative. And, you know, like, she's not really given a means to reclaim her narrative at any time. We see her casting about for meaning in her life through, like, trauma bond attempts with everyone and anyone in this book, to a degree that was, like, actually disturbing to me, because you know, like, we start out this book, first of all, we kind of knew what was going to happen because they give you a sneak peek in the previous book. So, like, we saw maybe a few pages in the back of the last book, but I did not know we would be engaging in colorism in the plot to ostensibly explore the problems of colorism, question mark. I'm not really sure what the purpose here was, or like what the intent was, but we can get into that. But we find that there is a baby left on the front door. First of all, Mrs. Curtis, if that's her name. Okay, I called for this woman to be removed from her job last episode, and I'm doubling down. No, Allison, she was...
Oh, no, she's not the one.
No, they hired Annie, air quotes Annie, to do housework. And she got so exacerbated by this lady who's like, when she's not napping, she's like being nuts. And she left. This lady quits on like her first day or something. And Mrs. Curtis is like, I'm greeting that news with my own news that I'm going to go take a nap. Once again, for like the 500th time in this series. So she's like up napping. Marie Grace is like bopping around. Somebody knocks at the door, leaves a baby. And we see, like, with her, she looks out down the street and we see like the shadow of presumably the mother of this baby.
Yes.
And Marie Grace's response to this is like very strange to me. She's not concerned. She's not like scared. She's not freaked out. She almost acts like it's Christmas morning. She was like, great news. She's like, finally, I get to like have a brother again. He can be like my brother. And it's like, oh God, like, Marie Grace, I feel so sad for you.
We also learn that the dog is kind of the first one to get on the case. And we have Marie Grace whispering, we'll see what it is. And then she looks. And I think probably for a reason or many reasons, there is a heavy implication that the woman who has left him behind is a Black woman, but it is not explicitly stated.
Well,
right?
It's the illustrations invite you to make that connection, because when the dad comes home, this is on page 8, and he asked Marie Grace, the woman who was on the corner, have you seen her before? Marie Grace bit her lip, trying to remember what the woman had looked like. Quote, I don't think so, she said at last, but it was dark and all I could tell was she was thin. Marie Grace thought for a moment. She had a kerchief around her head too, like the ones the women in the market wear. And then there's like an inset mini little illustration of a Black woman wearing a headscarf. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so if you haven't read the book, part of what kind of evolves over the course of it is Marie Grace kind of decides that she really wants this baby to be part of her life and her family's life. So she names the baby, she gets very invested in the baby, but she and Cecile and others have this ongoing conversation without stating so as to the race of the baby. and as to where the baby has come from. And I think there's a very heavy implication in this book that the baby's mother is Black and that the baby's father is white. And there is a question as to whether the baby can racially pass and basically make his way into a white driven orphanage. Like, that is the central crisis of the book. And we kind of explore this through like Marie Grace having conversations with his father, with her friend Cecile, with kind of others, and she learns how to take care of the baby. But there's so much that's not said about the baby's race, but it's also the key part to understanding what's going on in this book.
Yes. And so basically, like, the big narrative of this book is about, like, the big challenge is that Marie Grace wants to get this baby into an orphanage run by nuns. And it's a fictional order, I think, of the Holy Trinity or something. It's probably based on real orders that were in New Orleans in the period doing this work. But this specific orphanage is fictional. And it only accepts white orphans. So that presents a point of crisis. But to back up for a moment, like, the dad automatically assumes, he's like, yeah, the neighbor's going to nurse the baby. No
Correct.
problem. And presumably that woman is white. Then we get like the presumption. So Marie Grace automatically says, like, maybe he could be like my brother. It makes me feel like I have a brother again. And so for her, like, she has like a color blindness to the baby that we can't tell if that's her color blindness or the book's color blindness to the baby, but she obviously understands that he's not white or he might end up not passing. So the crisis for her is like, how can I help him pass to get into this orphanage? But it's like, it presents or kind of elides the real racial distinctions and biases that her dad would have had, that this neighbor who's asked to be the wet nurse likely would have had. So I think that was kind of an interesting sleight of hand. Like, the dad was like, yep, no problem. The neighbor will take care of him and this and that.
So there's a scene, too, where just a few pages after that discovery, this is in the chapter A Knock at Night, where Marie Grace actually holds herself up to the baby and essentially does a comparison of skin. The baby's skin was about the same color as her own, but in New Orleans, there were so many different shades of skin color that it was sometimes hard to tell who was white and who was a person of color. And I do think something that the book does well is gets at the fact that there's not a black-white binary in this community. It's not obvious what someone's background is. You can't judge their status based on melanin alone. What really kind of like haunted me throughout a reading of this book is I follow this Black genealogist on TikTok who's been going through his family records and contacting white people who are his ancestors for their family records and making the point that their family records are his family records, right? And that he has been cut from the family tree due to a variety of reasons, but mostly because of the fact that his ancestors were considered Black and theirs were considered white, despite sharing a family. And it's really kind of, and I'm not necessarily criticizing this book, it is so haunting to think that a child could have found one of your ancestors and made a decision by holding their arm up to that baby's arm and saying, I am willing this baby to be white. And we can read that now in a white supremacist society as she is helping him. But there's these little hints, right? And again, it's not explicitly stated in a way that's clear. Marie Grace smells coconut when the baby first arrives, and then she sees that there's a coconut salve. And again, you're meant to make this assumption that, like other healers in the book, this is coming from a Black woman or a Black family. It is really so disturbing to think that this did happen. This kind of thing did happen to babies and to people, where that mother may have been making her best possible choice, which was giving this child a different life and also basically severing her connection to that child, letting him pass in the sense of like a spiritual death from her life. It is such an emotional thing. And you're on page 10, page 12, and I thought, is this what we're doing?
Yes, it is. I mean,
it is what we're doing.
And in a sense, like, you can kind of make an argument that this is one of the American Girls in which we see the main character be most empowered. I know I was just saying earlier she's on the margins of her own story, and I don't think she has power over her own narrative. But like you're saying, we do watch her make two really formative decisions about this baby's life. Like you just described that first scene where she's just comparing their skin color. And then later, essentially, she's at the orphanage. She's started to, like, the baby was accepted through means that we can discuss, but she can't let go of their connection and wants to still act like he's her brother. So she's going there after school to play with the baby and all the orphans. And a woman there wants to take him to Chicago to a different orphanage where the likelihood of him being adopted is high. And the nun says, Sister B says, like, can your dad truly not find the mom? Or like, is there no reason to hope the mom will return? And she makes a decision originally to lie about that and is like, correct. Like he thinks the mom might come back, so you probably shouldn't let the baby go to Chicago. And then at the very last, like truly last minute, is she like, I was lying, sorry, like it's fine.
But part of why that's so hugely significant, and you're right about her power relative to this baby, is that the lie has major implications because disease has come to town, and people in her community at that time mapped fitness to survive the disease onto race. And so lying about his race or his background, she literally is playing with his life. And as you're talking, something that I keep kind of thinking about is, again, this is book 3. What do the girls always receive in book 3 in the historical canon? They get a doll. Marie Grace doesn't get a doll. She gets a person. And it really is kind of striking when you think about the different ways that we know people. Alva Vanderbilt is an example. Young white girls and boys who were presented with people as gifts. And I think even with a 10 years or so distance, you think about it, this is where like white savior complexes come from. I know the last time we talked about this with Samantha, we got the podcast review. I didn't know American Girls was a socialist podcast. It's not a socialist podcast comment to say this is where baggage that white women have to deal with on their own time comes from, right? Stories like this that come from history, real white people being given a black child or a child whose origin we don't exactly know to quote save. Like that's what Marie Grace thinks she is doing. And it's sort of heartbreaking because you think that's going to change the trajectory of her life, but far more importantly, until this little boy, Philip's like 5th, 6th, 7th great grandkids take a DNA test, that familial connection may never come back for him.
Yeah. And it is really striking to think about. It's just now with a lot of like the implementation or integration of DNA into ancestry, technologies that people are sort of like unearthing this or getting into the records that they've had access to for the first time. And yeah, I mean, it is striking to see the decisions that she makes. And I also think there's a psychological component to it. I mean, the fact that she keeps returning to her mother and her brother's death, I think what we're seeing is like, yeah, she lives in a culture where people are obsessed with death. Like it's in their lives. Like so many people in this period would know someone who died, from an illness or just younger than we might expect today and have to walk with that grief through the rest of their lives. And we don't see that she has a coping mechanism. No. We don't see any scenes where she's like, wow, I'm really thinking about mom with this. I'm thinking about my brother. This baby's reminding me of my brother. These are conversations she's having with herself. And that made me kind of sad because it's like, the dad is really busy building his practice or whatever he's doing. And Mrs. Curtis is napping, as we know. And, she doesn't really have anyone else. And that's where like the trauma bonding, I think, comes up. That's really sad to watch, where she's kind of investing a lot of meaning into relationships that we now know from having been in Cecile's headspace or point of view aren't as meaningful to Cecile or don't seem to be taking up as much like emotional real estate. Like there's a point in this book where Marie Grace is like, Yeah, I can't wait to see like, the singing teacher and Cecile and Louis, the guy who watches my dog while I take my singing lesson. She's like, we're like our own little family. And it's like, wow, like, okay, but you're not. And what does that mean about how you're processing like what's happening in your family of origin? I don't know. There's a lot going
Also,
on.
to think that she and this baby are actually both as much orphans as each other, and by that I mean they're both only missing one parent, presumably, or maybe both of this baby's parents are actually alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the uses of the word orphan in the 19th century, the huge shift and like mind shift that happens is from thinking of an orphan as a child or a person with dead parents to a person with absent parents. And we know that like in the wake of the Civil War, there's this even further shift of basically declaring parents unfit and then taking Black children away from Black families and kind of like crises of reunification. She and this child are not so different in some ways in that regard, but we don't really think of her as an orphan in the same way, really, even as a Samantha, right, who's missing both of her parents. There is still a white man to take care of Marie Grace. There is a woman who, in theory, should be able to like mother and love Philip, but because of society, he's an orphan.
Right.
And that's a change that happens, right? Like she has to make a decision and drop this baby off to strangers and kind of hope for the best. And you wonder if you're supposed to kind of guess that she has some kind of knowledge about what he's like as a doctor because he's helped other Black children in the community, but you're kind of just grasping for that. There's really no evidence.
Yeah, we're told he's basically been practicing for like 5 or 6 weeks or something, like not that long period of time. And basically at one point Marie Grace says to Cecile, Cecile's like, oh, your dad, like, what's going on here? And she was like, oh, my dad's a doctor. Like, he's like, so many like people trust him around New Orleans and come to him. And it's like, is this like some hype game where you're just sort of manifesting that will be true? Like, that's part of the dad's PR program? Because, in the first book, the dad was really struggling to get his practice going. So it's really hard to know what's happening with this practice.
Well, and I think clearly that's going to come into play again, like disease becomes a big part of like the last at least third of this book. It becomes explicitly stated that people are getting ill. And that's where it's interesting. There's a lot of conversations about immunity with Mary Grace and her father about the fact that like they are pretty much safe. Mm-hmm. Like, I wonder if you could talk about, I feel like so much of that was actually mapped onto race.
Yeah.
And I think Cecile gets that, and Cecile talks about that. But in Marie Grace's mind, it's like, oh, well, we're okay because
we've had it before.
We've had it, but the real conversation was quite different.
Yeah, I don't really think it was that common. And I do think that there's something going on where the plot of the book actually is inverting what the conversation of disease would be. So like to get Phillips into the white orphanage, Marie Grace needs to appeal to Cecile. That's what the note is about that we learned about in the last book.
Right.
And it also just makes no sense that she would scrawl this note and be like, 911, like, help me. And then when she finally gets to talk to her, she's like, the situation, like, we don't know how she described it to Cecile, but she was like, I need some assistance. And it really does feel like she's going to Cecile, not because she's her friend, but because she's Black. And I don't really, that's like a complicated exchange. But Cecile is like, yep, definitely want to help you. My aunt has some nice baby clothes for my cousin. And she ends up like giving Marie Grace to keep like a very nice baby outfit that almost works too well. And then the priest at the orphanage is like, I don't know, he's from a rich family. So I don't know. But so in the same way that Marie Grace, or in a different way that Marie Grace is deferring or investing a lot of prestige into Cecile and her family, who clearly are wealthy, in conversations about yellow fever, both in New Orleans and in the South and just generally at this period, a lot of disease, not just yellow fever, is pathologized involving conversations about race. So if you are a non-white person, you are much more likely to be blamed for the spread or the carrying disease than white communities. And a lot of this has to do with conversations about hygiene and cleanliness. And we see this going back to conversations about cholera in New York in the 1830s. We see it with cholera in New Orleans. We see it with yellow fever in Cuba when Walter Reed is there doing the experiments that will lead to understanding what actually causes yellow fever. There is still this hugely racialized component even to those experiments. So I think it's interesting that it's implied in the books, but it'd be interesting if it was more explicit, because I think in the times it would have been.
Yeah, and I think something that comes out is that class is seen as sort of the protection, right? That really is the Band-Aid. And we have this conversation with the richer girls, Lavinia and Sophrina, and they're complaining because it's hot, they're uncomfortable, they're sort of irritated. And we have Lavinia saying, well, my papa's not afraid and says we're staying. He reads the newspapers and he says there are no reports of the fever. There is a straight line from Lavinia to COVID denial, but we don't need to go there.
I was thinking
all the
that
talk
too. Yeah.
is just plain foolishness. And Marie Grace says, I wish the talk of yellow fever were just foolishness, but Papa says it isn't. And what's fascinating too is there is that cognitive dissonance that we know because we've been living through COVID that's so real. They're having this conversation as if there aren't literally bodies at a much higher rate being brought down the street,
right?
In caravans of the dead. And they're still well, I don't know, my dad says. And they have signs that people are literally shutting things down because they can't function. And I think we've lived through that cognitive dissonance. I followed someone through the pandemic on Twitter who lives near a crematorium, and she would post about just the extent to which it was busy that she had never seen before. And then the next tweet would be denying that anything had changed, or is this really serious? So I think this book absolutely gets that right, where people are fishing around for what might be happening, for what might be going on.
Yeah, and I think the really funny kind of moment, but it strikes to a true place, is where Mrs. Curtis at one point says to Marie Grace, I want you to carry this head of garlic with you when you walk down the street, because this is going to keep you from getting yellow fever. And it's our iconic queen, practicing folk medicine based on absolutely no science. But I mean, you can see conduits to that today.
Yeah.
Where people are saying oh, well, if you just insert non-helpful treatment or preventative measure for COVID here, these kind of understandings, I think, are fueled in part by people's real panic and fear and grasping for a sense of having control over something that seems by definition uncontrollable. And, there's something that happens when we read about medicine in the past where you find yourself screaming at them to be don't you know it's mosquitoes? In this case. Nope. And the text is hitting it over the head because it's Marie Grace wakes up under her mosquito net. She has to wear gloves to bed because she's scratching her bite so much. And, it does fill you with panic because we know something that she doesn't know.
Absolutely.
But, if you're trying to imagine yourself back in that time and you have no idea what's causing it, it's interesting that we don't see an overt discussion of what's causing it in this book, because I do think that was happening. If you read John Pintard's diary, he's a rich snob who's speculating every single day about what's happening. And for him, it's dirt in the city, it's filth, it's uncleanliness, it's immigrants, it's people of color that he maps all of this onto. Those same changes in the city were happening in New Orleans in this period. And it's interesting that there's no conversation about any of that we're seeing the panic, but not the speculation about the panic. And we're seeing a folk preventative measure, but no conversation around what it's actually preventing harm from. So I do think that it is somewhat kind of trying to have it both ways a little bit, or it's not really giving us the ugliness of the past, but in this case would be the truth of the past.
I will say I really recommend a book that I think does this so well, Anatomy by Dana Schwartz, and she's the voice behind the Noble Blood podcast. She writes, produces everything. It's a really fantastic show. In Anatomy, it's called Anatomy, a Love Story. It's about resurrection men and women who would dig up bodies, right? And who would provide them to medical students around the time that Frankenstein was written. And that's kind of bleeds into the story a bit as well. So if you love Frankenstein, you will really like this book. But essentially, a young woman who wants to study medicine and is kept out of medical school gets together with a resurrection boy so she can have access to people to study. And she ends up creating her own kind of folk medicine to treat the Roman fever, as they're calling it, and kind of has her own ways. But It's a book that I think, it's a YA novel, really beautifully gets into the psyche of a person dealing with disease in a way that I did not find upsetting despite still living from COVID, right? Like living through COVID. And I think that's a really tough balance. There were parts of this book and other books I have read recently where I was like, I don't want to hear this. Like when she's walking through and things were shutting down, it was like, I don't want to read this. And I also absolutely respect that when this was being researched and written 10 plus years ago, I think there was a lot of hubris that we would never be shut down by a pandemic or endemic again. And I do believe that. I think, right, we were still coming off of like some Obama highs. And I think when this was researched, there probably was a thought of like, we would never be shut down or this blindsided by disease again, and we were wrong.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I kind of read this with some nostalgia in a sense, like, wow, remember when people took medical like pandemics seriously? Like, ooh, those were heady times because, you know, I work in a place and I know a lot of people who are in this situation where, you know, people are just deciding like it's over. And the facts don't support that, but you're in this situation where you're being asked to engage in magical realism with everyone around you. Like, okay, we don't need masks anymore. And it's like, actually, that doesn't seem to be true. But then it puts you in this weird position, right? Where you have to say like, well, I actually don't think the facts support that. And people will gaslight you about this. So in a sense, seeing her walk around the city and having people be not panicked, but definitely taking what they view as preventative measures, I was like, wow, remember those days when you have to convince people to, you know, be careful.
I just think we haven't changed that much, right? It's like there's parts of the city that are totally shutting down. And then there's also a scene in this book where she's like, gee whiz, like basically scene to scene, she's like super excited to find out that her music teacher is engaged to her uncle. We'll talk about that in a second. And then in the next scene, her music teacher divulges that her friend has passed and she has to take care of someone and all of these other things. I think something this book gets right is that you imagine a pandemic as a massive pause button, and it's just not. It's total chaos, and everything else seems to continue except for there's people debilitated by disease, and I think book 4 is when that is going to hit us. But this book took me back to like March and April of 2020, where all of these certain pockets of things seem to still be happening, and then other things seem to have shut down completely. And I think through the point of view of a 10-year-old, it's effective to say like, wait, is this happening because of this? Is this happening because of this? And she is insightful enough, I think, to know that her father is going to be heavily involved. Like if she thought they were getting one-on-one time before, it's never happening now.
No, 100% not. And it's interesting that like, I think something you can see in this book too is that when a pandemic hits or there's a medical crisis, like everyone's bringing their own experience to that moment, whether it's experience with a comparable disease or death in your family or serious illness. So it's like, you know, of course, Marie Grace is thinking about her mother and her brother who have passed. And of course, like the dad is not thinking about it or he's not talking about it with her. I'm sure he's probably privately thinking about it. It's just interesting. And like the singing teacher was interesting because when she tells us she's getting married, which, you know, we're maybe on record saying that's something to pump your brakes on at this point, you know, she kind of gets into this conversation where she's like, yeah, I'm waiting for my dad to approve from France. So that's going to be a couple of weeks with the mail. But, you know, and somebody was like, I think it was Cecile, was like, what do you mean you're planning to get married in late summer? She was like, that's a horrible idea. Like, we all know that's the least healthy time to be here. Some people leave. And her response is like, well, we plan to be year-round residents. Like, we're not like you and some others. I mean, Cecile's family is year-round, but we're not like elite families who just like pick up and leave in the summer. We're going to be here. So it's all going to be cool. And it's like, but we have not been told that she's lived through yellow fever successfully. Like we've been told that Marie Grace and her dad have.
No.
So everyone else in my mind, like I'm on a watch list where I'm like, I'm scared because this is really setting up every character we've met in this book to be like, he was just approaching the happiest time in his life. And it's like, oh God, he's dead. Like, you know, you don't know.
So I feel like Argos is probably in danger. I also feel as
the
though
dog?
I'm just saying, I feel as though the servant who left the family, she's coming back.
Annie?
That's
oh wow.
That's Chekhov's servant. She's coming back.
Wow, okay.
Why did we learn as much as we did for her to not come back? I'm pretty nervous about Mademoiselle, just to flex my French for a second. I'm nervous for Lavinia because I think that this series punishes some people. I am finding it fascinating that other girls close to this period, like Kirsten got kittens, quilts, and like a family barn party in book 4. And these girls are going to go through disease.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
With mosquitoes. What did you make of what I think are pretty extensive scenes of Marie Grace playing with children in the orphanage? Like, what was kind of this is not Annie, I will say that.
It's not Annie. I mean, it's a very like romanticized depiction of orphan life. And all we're basically told is that this Catholic order is running this orphanage. The nuns, under the leadership of Sister B, are, keeping house, keeping everything together. And there's basically just a lot of recreation time. Like Marie Grace can bop over after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, hang out with whomever she chooses. There's hide and seek games. She's teaching people dominoes. Like we're seeing all kinds of stuff. But, that did give me pause because what we know of orphanages in that period does not suggest it was a 4-star resort experience.
No.
Like, how did it hit you?
It honestly, it just made me so sad, to be honest, because I think the peek into the past does get into this really well. As you're saying with the half orphans, it's like, these are people who probably have parents and they probably have siblings and they probably have other people who care about them. And the peek into the past rightfully points out that most orphanages were constructed for white children, at least in certain contexts, and then some were established separately, including one in New Orleans by a Black order just for Black children. Just kind of knowing what I know and the fact that there were white supremacist attacks on orphanages in the 19th century, like the famous 1863 mob attack, just to think of like the most vulnerable in society, right? Like disease is coming through in a major way. These children are all living together. I think in a lot of ways, one of our listeners shared with us a 1-star review of one of the Courtney books and the fact that HIV is brought up in the context of that book. And the parent essentially said in this 1-star review, like, these books aren't supposed to go there. They're not supposed to be about these really dark, heavy topics. And this listener said, like, okay, so she doesn't know about MARTA. But I would argue, like, a lot of these books have really heavy topics about trauma and difficulty, disease, death. And I think the Samantha book struck that chord really well, where we got a sense of Nellie is in danger. Like, the orphanage is not okay. Nellie is in danger. Nellie's life is about to go off track. And how does Samantha be a good friend and use her privilege? And I think choosing to have Marie Grace really latch on to this baby boy in a book that typically would be about a girl and a doll, I think it's really telling about things a lot of us just still haven't fully unpacked about like white people relative to others, right? Like rescue narratives and all these things.
Yeah, I mean, for her, it's like literally something she plays with. It stands in for a doll. Like that makes total sense. And it's not, in a sense, like she is so attached to him and flags like things that she thinks he likes or dislikes. Like he loves flowers. She says to the nun when he's first there, like Sister B, like he loves flowers. He loves, like, I forget what else. And the nun says something to the effect of like, oh, we'll make a note of that. So we make sure that like he gets that. And that part really bummed me out because it's like no one in an orphanage in this period is getting individualized attention. Like, it's just not happening. And it's in large part because, like, we're only a decade or something out or 2 decades out from, like, the establishment of what were called, like, retreats or insane asylums, of, you know, different kinds of prisons, of orphanages, like these institutions that were, some would say, meant to contain and discipline people who don't, like, air quotes, fit into society. Some would say, like, there was attempts at moral treatment and care. So I'm sure it was a sliding scale, but, you know, so not to speak too broadly, but from what we know, it's like, this was not going to be like the Brady Bunch for Philip.
No, and to that end, you have to kind of respect that Marie in her own mind thinks she's doing the right thing, right? Like she is 10 years old. Like this character, I found it so sort of shocking, the conversation that Marie Grace and Cecile are having. Remember when we changed places at the Mardi Gras ball? Everyone looked at our costumes, not at us. And that's where the concept comes from, right? To clothe him and to provide the blanket in a really specific way. And I think in some ways that absolutely gets the notion of passing correct, and in a lot of ways could lead to some slippery and inaccurate thinking. Like the expression, the clothes make the man. It's like, okay, to a point. Right. Like,
yeah. I mean, I think it kind of speaks to the general view of race in this book, which to me seems childlike, like in the sense that they genuinely can believe in that conversation that race is almost like clothing that you put on and can take off. At least for Marie Grace. I don't think Cecile understands it that way. But Cecile also like kind of from nowhere at one point is like, my grandpa would never own slaves. And it's like, okay, maybe but we've also seen in these books in a way that was interesting and complicated things that free Black people did enslave others in New Orleans. So
absolutely,
there is this voice in the book that's like, no one in this book is racist.
Right. No one in this book is bad. No one in this book is racist. The nuns have a pure disinterest in taking care of a child that they don't know. And I think, again, it's not to just criticize the book for its own sake, but even reading it, you can kind of get into this false sense of like, oh, of course, like going to this one orphanage over the other is better for him. And it's useful to kind of ask yourself like, well, why was it better? Why are we all assuming in the universe of this book that this treatment is better? There is a really good short study by Christy Clark Pujara, who is a historian of Rhode Island, about early benevolent societies in New England, and she focuses on Rhode Island. And she writes about how elite white women, a lot of whom got their money from textiles, would start these organizations like baby rescues, air quotes, in Black communities. And what ended up happening was this group of women basically said like, we can take care of our children, right? Like we just actually need like a little bit of support. Like we actually don't want you to take our children. And this benevolent society ended up turning into basically a very, very early daycare where it was like, no, these people don't want to give their children away. They want white people to finance a system that makes it possible for them to be parents the way that they need to be parents. And she does this brilliant job of showing through letters and different things the way that the institution got transformed. That's a pretty rare occurrence, right? Like, this baby goes into the system and this baby is not coming back to that mother, probably.
Definitely, probably not. And it was interesting. I was looking in Chronicling America and I found an article from the period in, I think, like either a Mississippi or a New Orleans newspaper where there was a short story imagining an Irish washerwoman who had 8 children and put them all in an orphanage because she couldn't work to survive and take care of her own children. And, they're doing it to lampoon like the rising immigrant population in these areas. But it also points, like you're saying, to a need that's never met, which is like what's needed isn't for her potentially to lose all her children, but to get support so that she can work outside the home to pay for her life and her children. So, it is kind of like you do scream sometimes reading this stuff like, wow, like not much has changed in terms of how these particular needs are getting met, and also who's meeting these needs. Like in the book and in the story you described, the article you described, it's private organizations. Like, where's the state in any of this stuff?
So we have a friend and I wrote to her and I said, okay, I need like now a few recommendations on the best books to read about nuns or convents and orphanages. And within an hour she wrote back and she was like, 2 books. Spirited Lives by Carol Coburn, which is a UNC press book. So it is more of an academic-y type book, but fantastic study of nuns and culture, 1836 to 1920. And she also recommended American Catholic Lay Groups and Transatlantic Social Reform by Deidre Maloney. I did a little bit of research for this episode by looking at the story of Marie Hachard, which is about the Ursulines, because that's kind of, I think, what's like hinted at in this book, but the Ursulines are not really brought up until Peek into the Past, and that's called Voice from an Early American Convent. You can actually like read her story, and there's a bit about disease in there as well.
What did you learn from checking those out?
So obviously like that's more of like a reprinted primary source. So it isn't like Marie was all about discipline and control, you know, but, I think part of what I recommend, why I'm recommending these books is I think like Catholicism also looks really different in this book than what we experienced with Josefina. And I think it's kind of kept at an arm's length in this book, right? Like Marie Grace is both someone who is attending a certain kind of school because of faith and is someone that is kind of like interacting with these places as like a place of wonder. Like it's not really seen as part of like her culture in a meaningful way. And I don't think we learn anything about Cecile. But part of what I was looking for in the Voice from an Early Convent was how does she talk about disease, right? And there's like not infrequent mentions of people getting fevers and people having these different kinds of experiences. I also think, as with everything, it's like, and New Orleans was different, right?
Yeah.
It's always like, and New Orleans was different, which I think is part of what's coming out in this book with like avoiding a sort of black-white binary. But think about what we learned in Addie, right? Addie being set a decade later. There are so many worlds in which like the baby that Addie loves so much in those books, there are so many timelines where that baby gets called an orphan. And she's not, right? So I think it's kind of interesting to put those in dialogue with each other where it's like, from Marie Grace's point of view, Philip is an orphan, straight up. He's an abandoned baby. But if you were to think like, if Addie and her mother like had to do that for some reason, we get this whole other interior world where that baby is thought of so differently.
Yeah, I think that's very true. It struck me that there's no conversation about faith in these books from Marie Grace's perspective. And I do think that in a time of stress or trauma, like, and even just dealing with her grief, I think that would be something that we could reasonably expect she would turn to, whether it was, you know, if she's Catholic, saying the rosary, like, you know, her maybe like her reader or whatever. And even it really struck me in the conversation with the nun where she has to tell her that essentially she's lied to her, because basically she presents that as a mistake that she's made and she apologizes. But if you're Catholic and you're speaking to someone who represents the church, like that's a really different conversation, because, you know, it's not like, hey, sorry, my bad, won't do it again. It's like, you know, oh my God, I'm heartily sorry for having offended thee. Like, you know, you would seek contrition, not from a nun, of course, but I mean, she would go to confession. Like there would be some understanding of this as a sin or some part of her spiritual life. And that doesn't happen, which is really interesting.
No, but I mean, she's Marie the Great, AKA Mary full of grace. I mean,
yeah, she sure is. She sure is. She has enough on her plate right now, but you know, it's like I don't believe this is not like a cloistered convent. I mean, they're out in the world, no. They're raising kids and like taking care of kids and doing God knows what else, like teaching and, you know, caring for the community probably in a whole host of ways. But it's interesting that it's like, it feels like they're cloistered from us, from the reader, because we don't really see much personality. We don't really see any interactions with Marie Grace other than like, okay, yeah, we'll make a note that he likes flowers. Thank you. Like, you know, that's kind of it. Like, I would like to see more of their lives. I would love to know what they look like.
This is also such a world in which like it's such a commercial, like television commercial type world where it's like, gee gosh, these parents are so behind these 10-year-olds. These 10-year-olds, like, they know the right kind of peanut butter to buy. They know that they actually need Eggos for dinner. It's like the kids are way ahead on the curve. And I think that's also why the orphanage is not really presented as a space of trauma, but as like a hangout. Yeah. Like, I got the vibe that she, like, if you knew kids whose parents or caretakers couldn't pick them up right when school was over, so there was like a hang space where people would watch you for pay. Like, that's the vibe that I got, where she was like, oh, school's out, dad's not gonna miss me, I'm gonna hang with these kids. And they think she's really cool, as opposed to resenting what she has, which is kind of interesting. Because even Samantha and Nellie experience that friction where Nellie's like, yeah, you're really rich and like you didn't invite me to your birthday party.
Oof, never.
I mean, actually, I projected that scene, but
fair enough. But yeah, I mean, it is weird, and it also strikes me as weird that in this book, yet again, we have many scenes where she's just bopping around the city by herself with her dog,
100%.
And this is after Cecile has basically, you know, told her not to do this, or was like, yeah, that's odd, I'm not allowed out without like my maid or like some adult. And she's like, yeah, cool, interesting, I'll take note of that. And then she's like, here I am again, like walking around the city alone because my dad's like doing God knows what.
I think Mademoiselle Ocean is probably onto her, but she's also dropped hints that like she knows about the full family real estate. And as is very classic with American Girl, it's like, yeah, we also own this other island. Like, we also own this other place. Don't worry about it. Don't ask where that money came from. Don't ask any questions of why we own an estate outside of the city. Because everyone here is good. Everything is good.
It's all fine.
Don't panic.
Dad's fine. I'm fine. It's fine. It's, you know.
I think by next book, we're going to be in the heat of summer, literally.
Oh, God. I'm not prepared for deaths in this series, so...
I think Luke may not make it. That's a prediction that I have. I don't really feel great about Luke.
He's already pretty absent. I'm not really attached to him.
Luke and Armand, I think, are maybe not going to get together because of the timeline and the pretend marriage, but I have a feeling that Trousseau is going to end up like overboard, or it's going to be cashed in for a funeral. That's my prediction.
That was my feeling too, because they kind of did what Lifetime would do, which is like heavily emphasize an event that will never take place because of a tragedy that's about to happen. So when Mademoiselle, oh God. Bonjour. Excusez-moi. When she says like, oh, you should take this blue like fabric and turn it into a blanket for the baby, she has to explain or Cecile steps in, of course, to explain what a trousseau is, because she knows she's like hep on everything cool. And it's like the degree of description of what a trousseau is and why it matters. You're like, oh God, like this trousseau, it's going to get made and it will never have a purpose. That's my prediction. I don't want to be right about this. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm just saying, why are we hearing so much about this?
Bridal trousseau, never used. Tragedy in 4 words. I think we're going there. We've survived a dark and stormy night with Marie Grace.
Yeah.
And the Orphans, plural. Didn't even really think we needed plural. I think I will just also say this, dear listeners, if I was a boy, I was going to be named Philip.
Really?
Yep. So Philip was my boy name. Correct.
Wow. So this was hard for you.
My brother and sister each got to pick a name. My sister picked Allison. My brother picked Philip.
And what about Beth?
Beth was also my sister's choice.
She got to pick both names?
Yep. I was going to be PJ or Philip John if I was a boy.
Wow.
Well, next episode will be entirely in French.
Oh, God, that's not going to go well. I'll just be like, I will be represented by a Google Translate robot voice, and I'll have to be translating in real time.
You know, it works on Before the 90 Days and 90 Day Fiancé, so I think it can work for us.
I honestly, like when I watched Lupin, which I really enjoyed on Netflix, I was like, whew, maybe this is when I actually learned French. It's going to happen. Like when I went to Paris and I was like, I love it here. This is amazing. I want to live here someday. And I was like, ooh, would have to learn French. But maybe this is the time. I don't know, Allison.
Emily says no. Emily in Paris says no.
So
Emily
she
in
doesn't
Paris
know
says
French.
No. That's a distinctive part of her character, that she's an American who aggressively does not know French.
So like American exceptionalism is still kicking in France.
It's still alive and well, and I'll also say, like, after much listener feedback, we are doing a Patreon episode on The Midwife's Apprentice. So we are going to the medieval era just for you all.
Wow.
Language is slippery. That's what I've learned. Language is slippery.
You know, I'm prepared for this. I thought I was going to be a medievalist. Again, I would have had to learn French and probably Latin, and so that probably held me back amongst some other life decisions. But I'm not ready for this, but I'm also been preparing my whole life.
I'm thrilled. I'm excited. I'm excited to get another book from Cecile's POV. to go through this entire series. Now is the time. I think we both have some ideas of what we would like to learn outside of these books. Mardi Gras history, yellow fever history. We have names, we have ideas circulating, but write to us. Like, if you're a Mardi Gras expert, this is your moment.
Or call us. I mean, now that I'm like back on this, like,
yeah,
I'm listening.
If you want to send me beignets, you may do that as well.
My God, I would love that. Actually, I'm deep in Cadbury egg season, mini eggs.
Oh.
Have you ever had the mini chocolate eggs from Cadbury?
You know, I don't even know that I want to go here because we got a lot of flack for our peep joke last year.
I don't even remember that. See, like, I just block out stuff. I just move on. I just move on. Like, you're holding on to stuff. Like, you're the institutional memory of stuff that we probably should let go or forget. Whereas I'm basically like genuinely not even like philosophically choosing to let it go. I probably have low-key Alzheimer's at this point. I'm just like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay. I vaguely remember that.
You're Mademoiselle thinking you're marrying Marie Grace's uncle.
Yep.
At this point, like, that's the level that you're at.
I'm in a romanticized place in my life in this podcast. Like, I'm eating, just like if anyone else is out there is on this, like, mini Cadbury eggs, Allison, this is like where it's at. It hits different. It is better than M&Ms. It is like, I cannot be around them, and I can't not be around them right now. Like, that's my season. That's my truth. And I did see on CBS Sunday Morning, which is my favorite TV show, they did a story on king cakes, which obviously you and I know about from Casey.
Of course.
But there was the most disturbing image I've ever seen. I meant to take a screen grab. I'll have to find it. But they interviewed a bunch of bakers in New Orleans about how many different types of king cake there are. And it was like really interesting. And this like Vietnamese immigrant who was like, I make my own king cake, and it's like, I'm part of this. And she won a James Beard Award and whatever. But they go to these other guys and he's like, of course we put the baby into all of the king cakes. He holds up a bag. It's a plastic bag filled with just tiny baby figures that are going to go into king cakes. And just that image alone, I was like, I can't sleep after this.
No.
I ate some Cadbury eggs to feel safe. Like, I had to get through it. But
you don't get that with Reese's Cups.
It doesn't do that to you.
But you don't have the rich complexity and history and connection to Marie Grace and all these other things. So if people need to talk to you about, I'm going to call it like mini egg season. I don't really know what else to call it. How should they find you?
So please, call me, beat me if you want to reach me. Like, find me on Instagram at Mimi Mahoney or on Twitter at Mary Mahoney123. Or, I guess like wherever these days. But Allison, if people want to talk to you about like potential names that, the road not taken with their names, what their snack of choice is during Mardi Gras, like, where can you be found?
You can reach us in all of the ways, including telephone, P.O. Box, right on our website for American Girls Podcast. But you can find me at Allison Horrocks on Twitter or Instagram. You can also find the show on Facebook. And if you look us up at A Girls Pod on Linktree, that's where you'll find everything else. A quick link to our TeePublic store, our Libro FM, all those other things. We look forward to hearing from you. I promise I will never pick up the phone when you call. It does go right to voicemail, but maybe you'll hit me when I'm in Market Basket, which is what happened to me last week. So who knows?
Hit you where you live.
That's right.
And I just want to say, like, we just passed our 3-year anniversary. Thanks to everyone who stayed with us. And I was wearing Allison, our sweatshirt yesterday.
Were
like,
you?
I wear our merch. Like, I have a sweatshirt. I'm too embarrassed to wear it out of the house because if anyone identified me, I'd feel like insane or like,
no, you should.
It's too extra. But I just want to say, like, again, we make basically nothing off the merch, but like, it's such a comfortable sweatshirt. Like, for real. I need to get one that I will wear out of the house. It's not like the giant logo because I don't want to be called out. I'm paranoid. But anyway, thanks to everyone who's listened, who's stayed with us, who's told their friends. Maybe I'll see you out in the streets in my sweatshirt. I don't know. I don't know anymore.
That's right.